I want to talk about the voice of customer data big time, but I want to set the stage and the context here a little bit. So contact centers have the most interaction with the customers of anyone in the company. Yet there's nobody usually in the company that actually is responsible for the voice of the customer. This is a mantle for us to take, I guess, is one way to put it. And to accentuate the fact that contact centers are usually looked upon still, in this day and age, as cost centers, one of the biggest overhead costs of the business. We're going to talk about revenue contribution by understanding the voice of the customer. I had a recent conversation that I think this kind of accentuates the importance of this point. It was with a woman, her name was Efrat Ravid, and she's not only a 3-time CMO, but she's a Goldman Sachs Value Accelerator Advisor. And she said, this is how important voice of the customer is, Steve. I recommend to CMOs that you spend 20% of your time talking with customers, 20% of the time. That's a lot of time, you C-suite individual. The point here is we're in a gold mine. It's called customer insights. And if we harness this correctly, it will give us an understanding of the customer that will give us an additional competitive advantage in the marketplace. So this idea of voice of the customer data and analytics and translating it and making it usable and executable by the company is no small thing. So I'm going to ask you this question. Voice of the customer data. All right, it's important. But why is it a stepchild in a lot of companies? You've talked about how there's a lot of data in companies. So one of our biggest challenges here is making sure that internally people are understanding the power of the voice of the customer. Why is that happening? And what should we be doing?
Well, I think there's a few reasons, but I think ultimately one of the reasons is that it's generally more difficult to analyze it. A lot of it is free text or is somehow not as concrete. There's, of course, huge advances in tooling like the natural language processing tooling with large language models and all these AI buzzwords that are out there now that are making this kind of step change. And maybe that will be what really ends up making this kind of data more consistently available to people in a way that it wasn't before, where before, as a product manager, I don't have time to go and read every product review that comes in, but I would have time to read a summarized version of all of the reviews from last week that's been generated by some LLM. But I think that's one of the things that we've seen in trying to distribute these insights and distribute this way of working, putting the voice of customer data first, is that the analytics are simply more difficult. It's simply more fluffy, and it's not something that is as easy to immediately show the value. So if you, for example, are taking the example of product reviews, maybe you see 2 or 3 one-star reviews mentioning some kind of issue that a consumer is having with your product. But there are these questions that come up like, okay, it's 2 or 3. Is that a real problem? Is it enough of the installed base to consider that as an issue? And then, of course, the natural question is, well, what percentage of people leave a review? Is 2 or 3 representative of just a sample of reviews? Or if I take the entire installed base, is 2 or 3 actually much bigger, but the people who have the issue don't bother to leave a review? So there are all these kinds of difficult questions that no one can really answer with the data that's available. Just looking at the product reviews is not possible. And I think that's where what we've been trying to do in leveraging more of this broader definition of voice of customer data is putting together some kind of view that helps answer these questions. So like you were saying, the contact center, they have the most connection, the most direct connections with consumers. So let's start not looking at product review data. That's too far down the line. We launched a new product. I just want to know, as a product manager, every day, how many calls did I get about my product and what were they calling about? And I want specifics. I want to know, was it error code E05 or E30? Or was it that they didn't understand the manual or they didn't understand how this element of the unboxing experience was? So starting to leverage more of what may be considered operational data, the number of calls and why they were calling. I think these kinds of things are the way that we've been trying to answer these difficult questions and make it so that people can recognize more of the value than just relying on these individual data sources like the reviews or like a survey that they may take.